over there is what they're doing to
There you
us.
go.
You know.
Yay!
Hey, old.
Vigorously mowing our desk.
Hey!
Adam can tell us about his new Apple iPad. This is a Manhattan with an Adam twist.
Apparently we're naming it now.
An Adam twist.
In fairness, I actually recommended an
And
orange.
it is an enormous improvement. It's really good.
I'm essentially James Bond when it comes to inventing things like that. But it was stirred, not shaken. So maybe that's an interesting thing for Manhattans, that you want to stir them and not shake them.
It was for martinis, and it was James Bond. Shaken, not stirred.
Yeah. Jack is here, but he's having a nap right now. Well, Nancy will know who we're talking. And she was very, very, very happy to hear that he was coming today. We went to see Les Miserables.
Yes.
You've got something coming out of your
James
eye.
says it's a lame, miserable Christmas. He thought it was okay.
It probably was a little over his head right away.
Mm-hmm.
It takes some getting used
Good
to.
music.
During the Civil War, when Les Miserables was first published during the American Civil War, they referred to the Southern armies as Lee's Miserables. Well, that's from John Brown's Bible.
What's
And
the best?
also, you know what else came out right about that time? The big thing that came up during the American Civil War was the publication of Darwin's theories about evolution.
During the Civil War? I thought that was a Victorian controversy.
Well, the Civil War happened during the Victorian age, as you remember.
Should know.
What?
I think of the Victorian age as more like the 1890s through the 1910s.
That's the
Before
well, no, most of that's not the 1890s to 1910. Victoria died in 1900.
I didn't know that.
Excuse me, in 1900, yeah.
You positive?
I'm positive. Yeah.
You're usually right when you're
Adam will
positive.
now check it on his iPad to make
But
sure.
he believes Wikipedia, which tells you strange things about a lot of stuff like Gimlet.
When did?
Well, that's
I
everybody,
always
gonna-
go
I'm gonna-
beyond and actually go to the cited source. As
Good.
opposed to just
Good for you.
Jack was so funny today. I had a copy of the New York Times and offered it to him, and he said he didn't want that. He said that is a biased newspaper. It's a liberal. It has a liberal bias. And I said, well, what doesn't have some kind of a bias? And he said, well, the Wall Street Journal.
Ha ha ha.
And I said, Jack, you've got to be kidding.
And
How
I
about-
said, by no bias, you mean it has the bias that you agree with.
No kidding. Like faux news. FAUX news.
There's a pretty thick line between Fox News and the Wall Street Journal. I think that though that their actual ability to change minds is fairly overstated, and I think the 2012 election was
Well, I think the actual ability of newscasts to change minds is overstated.
yeah, but I think that what Fox News does is it creates kind of this insular culture on the right that sort of blocks out all other thought. So you got kind of the situation you had in the 2012 election where the conservatives legitimately did not know what the hell was going on. Many people on the right were, and I believe them on this, convinced that Romney was going to win. They had their polling models and...
Well, that brings up my favorite topic these days, and that is statistical proof. I don't believe in it.
Well,
I think statistics, like Jack was starting out to point out last night, he said they searched a block of San Francisco, a block in San Francisco, to find a control subject on the subject of gay marriage.
well,
Now, I can almost tell you for sure how that one's going to come out. For example, whatever your statistics show, you've got to look at the source of those statistics and evaluate how truly usable that source is.
Yeah,
That's right.
which it's
That's right.
confusing to me what the point of something like Rasmussen is, which
Look.
always has just an obvious 2 or 3 point conservative bias, and I'm not entirely sure what good that does anybody. Because if you're just providing your side with crappy information, it seems to me.
Well, I think also the president took a lot of heat for health care problems
Yes.
that, of course, he didn't create, he didn't like.
Yeah.
But his health care program just scared hell out of a lot. It wasn't unconstitutional. Nobody with any sense said it was unconstitutional.
Yeah, but
Well,
they
he
were
said
saying
it
it was. It was a lot of
Said it
people.
was unconstitutional.
Yes.
Who, the president said it was unconstitutional?
Justice Antonin Scalia.
Yeah, he
Good
said
hero.
it was. He said
Well,
Said
it
it was
was.
disagree with-
unconstitutional.
I just, yeah, I'll tell you why though. I've been into that at great length.
Right. But he's a person with any kind of sense.
He's got lots of sense,
Yeah.
but he also
Has a lot of biases.
had a lot of bias on that particular subject. He and everybody else, and they thought Roberts was among them, but he wasn't. Wanted to overturn Wickard versus Filburn
Right.
because they thought, and I agreed with him, Wickard versus Filburn was a terrible decision in 1942. Or
And it
whatever
was.
Okay, describe Wickard versus Filburn for the camera because most people aren't law students.
Let me Google that for you.
Oh,
Um,
you know it, Adam, off the top of your head?
it's the case where the Supreme Court. I looked it up because of him. And in fairness,
The Commerce Clause.
it's
Yeah.
it says that a farmer being forced to not use his own wheat for his own consumption.
No,
I
no.
thought it was selling milk of his own cow.
I thought he was using. He was actually
That was
using
affecting
the milk.
interstate commerce.
A farmer using
Milk from his
Milk.
own cow.
from his own cow
Yeah.
was
Affected
in
interstate.
interstate commerce.
Was a
Because-
matter of interstate commerce.
You know why?
Because it affected the price.
No, because it meant that he would not be buying milk from other
It affects the
sources.
price, yeah.
Well,
Now that
latter,
is
that's
a
little
strained
bit of
argument.
extension, but it was, but yeah, because it impacted. It was the high watermark of the so-called impact theory on defining what interstate commerce. I remember Jim Barr and Frank Liddell and I used to sit around and talk about it with long faces, saying, I tell you, when things get that turned around, something's wrong. Something's
like-
wrong in the country.
I think people always miss the fact that our government is elected, and despite the fact that they've just claimed an enormous amount of power with Wickard v. Filburn, which is probably true. If you can do that, then the government can really do anything.
That's
But
right.
anyway,
That's why you have checks and balances.
Scalia and the other three who voted with him
Yeah.
wanted to overrule
Wickard v. Filburn.
Wickard versus Filburn.
And you think they
And
would?
I think that was a very bad idea because it had been the settled law for so long
Absolutely.
that throwing it out on its ear would have been extremely disruptive,
Well, that's one thing that
even
a lot
if it
of-
was wrong in the first place.
That's one thing that a lot of analysts have said about Roberts is that his court is gaining somewhat of a reputation of throwing conservative grenades in the into the legal system, like with the most famous being Citizens United,
Oh my gosh.
and he didn't want to gain that reputation of just
He would lose
There's more
credibility.
nuance
lose
than that.
credibility.
Now, why is that important, Adam? Do you know why that's important? You learned that in law
Why is
school
that
too.
important?
Because the only thing that the court has is prestige.
Credibility.
There's nothing but
Right
credibility.
on point, Adam. Beautifully said.
It has no money. It has no power of enforcement. All it has is
It depends on
prestige.
the willingness of the country to accept what it says.
Yeah, and the court was in a great deal of danger of becoming known as just a conservative mouthpiece.
That's what I thought it was.
Which
I was very surprised and pleased with that ruling.
I thought it was a great ruling. I read the whole thing cover to cover. But
Did you?
it was-
You did?
Yeah.
And,
I started reading Ruth Bader Ginsburg's ruling, but I stopped.
Well, did they say it was the power to tax? They didn't,
Yeah,
did they?
they said it was the power to tax. That was the.
Okay.
That was the. He said basically.
Oh, you mean you thought you thought upholding it was great?
Yeah, I think that he didn't want to. He didn't want to extend the logic of Wickard v. Filburn. He didn't want to say that actually the government has these powers and what he felt additional powers as well. He didn't want to do that, and I was at first under the impression that it would create a kind of a firewall against future attempts to expand that line of reasoning. But then a post by you that talking about non-binding dictum.
Yeah.
I don't think that will have nearly as much effect as I originally thought it would. But it was a well-reasoned case, I thought, and he convinced me that it didn't qualify under the Commerce Clause.
Well, those of us who always said it was clearly constitutional,
Right.
the whether you liked it or not, started off saying it's obviously
was within the constitutional power of Congress to levy taxes for the general welfare.